this is not a response. It's not a reaction. It's more of my thought process after watching the interview that Joe Budden just broadcast with Candace Owens. First off, I think that it was an amazing thing for him to step out onto a platform, and in a non-confrontational, non-hostile, way, speak with someone who many in the community of a certain disposition feel is not for Black people. I can say that for myself, I tend to reserve judgment publicly and privately, especially if I know I haven't taken the time to actually listen to a person in their point of view, or not rhetoric, but whatever perspective they have on whatever it is that we're talking about. And I can say my experience with Candace Owens, of course, I've seen all the stuff with, the White Lives Matter shirt and Blexit and, white white conservatives or Black conservatives. There's a lot of headlines around Candace Owens and how she, quote unquote, works against the Black community, and, she supports Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is this, and, Kanye was in this space and wearing the, Make America Great Again hats, and she's puppeting him, and, all of this stuff that was out. And again, I didn't make a judgment, but I was feeling a kind of way about the things that I was seeing. But I never really got an opportunity to hear her speak, with regard to a sound clip or a sound bite. I understand how that can be taken out of context and used against a person or used to create a narrative. So of course, the sound bites and the sound clicks in the algorithm that matches my particular view pattern, it was not going to be flattering for Candace Owens. And so I think the first time that I actually heard her speak, watched an actual event that she was speaking at, was I forgot which year it was. She was on the Revolt conference, and she was on stage. It was her, Killer Mike, I think T.I. ended up on stage. There might have been someone else, but this was the first time that I actually saw Candace Owens in a forum, and she was addressing multiple different topics, but I was surprised, pleasantly surprised at the things that she was saying. And I say that because, of course, everything that I'd seen up until then had framed her in a specific light. And I am a person that, as far as political allegiance, I don't really have any. I I want things right for everyone, but to start off, I want things right with me. I want things right with my loved ones. I want things right with my extended family. I want things right with my people as far as being a black person in America, and then so on and so forth. So, you know, it doesn't matter where that comes from. So I'm not necessarily tied to any one particular political party or one particular political view. Some things I think I'm conservative about. Some things I think I'm more liberal about. And I hate to even label it like that. It's just, this is how I feel about whatever it is that we're talking about. It's my personal perspective, my personal feeling, my personal wish, what I value, and how I feel like those values should be protected. But again, and on this Revolt panel, Candace Owens, you couldn't watch that Revolt panel and think that Candace Owens is not for Black America. It was very obvious. So that was the first time that I actually took an opportunity to actually hear a complete thought from her. And I was happy with what I heard. And then that was kind of it. You know, I didn't really see a need to, do any more research. I wasn't inspired to look up for anything else. I kind of just took it for what it was. And then I heard that this Joe Budden interview was coming along. And I say preface, before that, there were some posts and some things that came up on my timeline on Instagram where I was like surprised. She started doing, or there were some interviews that she did on her podcast with some individuals, and I was like, wow, I was really impressed at what she had said. Like, it's not like she slowed down and that's why I didn't watch any more of her. I just wasn't on her like that. So it wasn't anything that I was seeing to inspire me to look deeper into her political views and perspectives about what is right and what's important to her. But these interviews just coincidentally just started to show up on my timeline, and I'm getting more and more curious. Like, now I'm thinking, where is the idea that she's against Black America coming from? Like, who's creating this? Because everything that I'm hearing from her doesn't sound like she's against Black America at all. I think she holds us to a higher standard because she believes that we can achieve and exceed that standard, and that she champions Black people, and that she wants us to be the best version of ourselves. Now, I want to be clear. This is what I'm hearing. Now, if she's doing some other things in the dark, I don't have any control over that. But what she's putting out in complete statements, and being on the political circuit, being in interviews when people are attempting to trip you up, there's sometimes that they ask questions where they're trying to force her like, the only way for her to answer that question is to word it in a way where they can take her answer and chop it up and make it seem like she doesn't give a crap about Black people, right? And I think it also makes it easy for Black people to align with that thought process because she is a Trump supporter. But she said some things in this interview that I have thought myself with regard to people actually not liking Trump, especially in the black community. And I'm from the hip hop generation of a certain age, and I remember how it was a flex. It was a huge flex in your song and in real life for you to mention, be around, have Donald Trump somewhere in your atmosphere. You know what I'm saying? There are plenty of pictures of hip hop people from the culture around Donald Trump. You know, talking about Donald Trump being a symbol of the American dream, you know, of affluence, of, you know, this is what we aspire to be, or, you know, this is luxury, this is success. Like, I mean, I just can't, it's just undeniable that was definitely something, that was a thing in the 90s and the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. So again, you guys can go watch the interview. It's on Patreon under the Joe Budden Patreon page. It's an amazing interview. I was very impressed with the way Joe conducted the interview and the way Candace, you know, she did her thing. So it definitely inspired me to go out and seek. I subscribed to her YouTube page, and I'm like, I want to know. I'm one of those people who I don't really care what the popular opinion is. I need to know and see for myself, because all I care about is facts, because that's what really matters. I call, even emotionally, I want to be emotionally efficient. I want to channel my emotion with logic. I want to temper it with logic. Like, emotion is necessary, but I think emotion should be an engine to drive logic, and vice versa. I think, well, not vice versa. I don't think, I think it's balance in both. I think that being emotional is a natural thing, but I think you should temper that emotion with logic. And does it make sense to feel the way that you're feeling? Because, you know, that's how you regulate it. And then also, you could be logical. You could have all the facts and figures, but it may take passion. It may take emotion to actually utilize that logical, that analytical, critical thought. It may need some emotional energy behind it to actually have it hit the way that you want it to affect whatever you're, you know, using it on. So I'm going to listen to these things that are quote unquote being advertised to me and my community as ills or as solutions, you know, as problems or as solutions. And then I'm going to actually, for myself, analyze that and have a judgment based off of some critical thinking. Also, with that being said, you know, when you are doing these deep dives, you also have to take into account the reliability of the source material, which is why I like to hear straight from a person's mouth versus the interpretation of someone who's commentating on what this person is saying and what they mean. So, you know, there was another speech that she gave that I guess had some viral comments, and, you know, she mentions it in the interview with Joe. And I just wanted to gain the context of the statement. I didn't even know about the virility of whatever the headline was that she's talking about. And it was a comment of her about her stating that she's never been a slave in this country. So I went back and I listened to the speech that she gave, and within the context of the speech, what she said made perfect sense. And it wasn't about there not being that slavery didn't exist and that there's no oppression in this country. So again, I'll leave those things to you to watch and listen and purview and kind of figure out where you stand with it. And that's part of what I want to talk about today. But the other part is, again, I'm about nuance. I'm about like what's really happening and why people really are thinking and feeling the way that they're feeling about the things that are going on in this country. I watched something, and I'm sorry, I'm bad at source material, and I need to get better. I watched something a couple years ago where, and it might have even been Killer Mike, where they were talking about the two-party political system is rigged, and it's set up for there to be division, and that in other countries there isn't a two-party political system, and it allows for the exact point that I'm about to try to make to occur. There's a lot of nuance in politics that because you only have two parties, you're not allowed to examine, you're not allowed to demand, you're not allowed to flesh out. You only have two choices. It's either this or that. And there's such polar opposites that you can't even describe with or prescribe with your vote that you like these parts of this political party, but you don't like these, you like A, but you don't like B of the Democrats, and you like C, but you don't like D of the Republicans. You can't do that. Like, you have to take the good with the bad. And when you're talking about policy that's going to affect you and generations beyond you, and, I think that's kind of puts us as the citizenship at a disadvantage, and then they instigate this almost gang-like mentality of Democrats versus Republicans, like where there's hatred and vitriol spewed just for wanting to hear what the other side has to say. And I'm just not with it. So that's the piece that I want to talk about today, because I think that's the most important part. Like, I think it's difficult for anybody who's not into politics to actually flesh out, and I've done it the last couple of elections that I voted on. Like, I've looked up and tried to research what are the actual policies that these candidates and these parties attempting to put into place. Like, what are we actually voting on besides the perception and the presumption that this party is for black people and this party is for elitist white people? Because I don't care. I want to know. I want to know what's best for, because I got kids. This is a legacy play. Like, this is beyond me. These are things that are going to affect my children, and my children are now adulting. And so it affects them more directly because they are contributing tax-paying, contributing members of society. And so it's important to, like, I'm not just going, I've never been a person to go with the crowd. I've never been a person to be like, yo, y'all are cool, y'all are doing this, I'm gonna do it too. I've always sat back, researched, and made a decision that made sense with my point of view. Since I was a kid, it was something that my father and my mother instilled in me and my brother, and it logic problems, critical thinking has always been, I've always trying to figure out the truth about what's going on so I can actually make a decision that I feel best fits, what I think is going on. Misinformation is dangerous. It's so dangerous. So, here's an example of the nuance, right? Like, let's say Donald Trump has financial, economic policy that is good for the country, right? I would absolutely support that if it made sense to me, right? I don't have any problem supporting what is good, especially if it's going to benefit Black people as well as everybody else, right? The problem comes when within that support, there comes a constituency that is dangerous to my people, right? Like, I'm trying to articulate the reason why, this fear-mongering and the political type of bullying that goes on happens, and why it makes people use defensive politics even to their own detriment. Because I'm sorry, I've been able to vote for some time now, and I can't say anything about in recent years where the Democratic Party has done something to affect change in the Black community. I'm sorry. I don't even think we are the one unique ethnic group that is not allowed to be addressed directly. Even when they're putting in policies that are actually supposed to be affecting us directly, they can't even say it. For example, there's a lot of conversation about white supremacy, about slavery, about reparations, and things of that nature. So I noticed, or I know that, the 13th Amendment came long after the Constitution was written. So I Googled, where or if slavery is actually talked about in the Constitution. And I was surprised, outside of the 13th Amendment, prior to the 13th Amendment, there's no conversation about slavery. Now, there's also the famous quote about 3/5 of a man. Although there are no direct, like, slavery outside of the 13th Amendment is not spoken specifically about, slaves are mentioned offhandedly in many different ways. Actually, in about 3 different ways that I saw in my short bit of research. Now, there is that famous quote about Black people being 3/5 of a man. But I went to the Constitution, of course, and if I'm to paraphrase that piece of legislature, that piece of writing in the Constitution, doesn't mention Black people, although what that 3/5 of a man was speaking to people who are not free indentured servants or things of that nature, but I don't think that's the wording that they used. But basically, that those people who weren't considered and counted as citizens would count as 3/5 of a man in political party weighting. And basically, it was a way to give slave owners more power and pull in the political process by counting their slaves as 3/5 of a man. Right? Now, again, there's nuance to that. And again, I'm not glorifying that. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm just saying that before I went and actually read it, I thought in the Constitution it said black people are only 3/5 of a man. Something to that effect. And, again, while what they use as a reference could only be talking about black people because we were the slave class of that time, there is that single drawing the line when there's no dots to connect is a dangerous practice, to say the least. So again, there were a couple of other things that I looked up in the Constitution where I was just surprised about this document isn't what I thought it was. I thought it was before doing this research, I thought it was a document that served white people who were perpetrating a white supremacist point of view. Greedy middle class and rich folks who didn't want to listen to the king, who was like, yo, I'm about to get my own shit and run my own country my own way, not like with a queen and a king. And I'm going to get these niggas from these jungles to come build this shit for me because I ain't trying to get my hands dirty. That's basically what I felt like. And to a certain degree, I think those things are still happening today, but that's not what this is about. There is no nuance in politics, and therefore it's very difficult for a person like me to actually say comfortably who I support. And that's just the reality of it. I feel like we don't, because of that, we're less likely or we're reluctant to actually get involved in the political process. And it's a shame, because that is the way that we as a people are going to be able to protect ourselves, by being involved. And that doesn't mean just voting, but actually holding office and being in these rooms locally to help protect our neighborhoods and protect our families. And again, a lot of this stuff is what Candace Owens has been talking about. Again, pleasantly informed where I wasn't informed before. She had a lot of valid points. And it's like, you can almost compare it to, watching White Men Can't Jump, the conversation between Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson, where they're like, we black people appreciate the show more than the result. Like, they'll lose to look pretty, where the other side would rather win than look good. And I don't care about looking good. I care about winning. It would be nice to do both, but if I had to choose, I don't want to be a pretty loser. I don't want to be a pretty slave. I'll be a bummy winner. I'll look bummy as hell if I know my family is safe. If I know my sons can walk without being accused or seen as criminals or threats to society. If my daughters are not sexualized and seen just as objects. If our brown skin and culture is not seen as a threat that needs to be subdued, but as a complement and as a driver and a leader of culture and humanity, like, those are the things that matter to me. And again, I just think that Candace Owens, for me, is the perfect metaphor for how Black America views themselves and this country and its relationship. There are some perceptions of certain things that we don't even give an opportunity to actually listen to, because the connotation, the cloud around it has been shown to be dark, shown to be negative, and shown to not be supportive of us. And so we don't even take the time to check it out. And I can say honestly, I was wrong, all the way wrong. And I don't necessarily agree with all of her points of view, because she's also in a place where she's supporting a particular political perspective. So she has to go all the way to the right. She has to, because, again, the point is to win. And you can't allow nuance to divide your support. So you have to go all the way, even if you believe that there's nuance in what we're talking about. Now it's not about are you doing and being consistent. It's about you need to win. I don't know what the solution is. And again, if I figure out that podcast where that gentleman was speaking about alternative political party solutions, I'll definitely revisit and speak about that. But I don't know, this upcoming election seems like a tipping point. And I think it is important, not just in this election, but in the locals and anything that you're going to participate in that's going to have an effect on your future and your children's future. I think this one is one of them ones. And we need to take the opportunity to actually investigate and see what's going on before we make a judgment that could cripple us. I'm not for or against any yet, because I haven't had an opportunity to actually look at their policies. But I will no longer utilize the Cliff Notes to figure out who's on my side and who's not, because my side deserves better analytics, more thorough work, than anything that has been shown before. We deserve that. So again, shout out to Joe Budden podcast. Again, that interview with Candace Owens was incredibly enlightening, to say the least. And I'm definitely going to stay on and stay tuned to hear more about what it is that she feels is going on. Other than that, I don't think that this is a situation that needs a resolution. I think it just needs a change in behavior. People need to actually take the time and listen before they make a judgment on what's going on. There's so many misquotes and, clips that have been altered, and I don't say altered, but have been edited to the point to create a narrative that didn't exist in the original context of the conversation. And that's just fucked up. And in knowing that that's coming from a power that we couldn't imagine to touch, the fact that it is happening should be absolutely terrifying. We need to wake up and actually pay attention to what's happening. And I'm just going to say this. If you're going to vote, whoever you're going to vote for, you need to hold them accountable. And if we're looking at past performance and there are people who decide to vote a different way because the way they have been voting hasn't changed or done anything positive for their community, I don't think that you should blame them. Because it would be stupid to keep putting people in the office who all they do is, utilize and weaponize our own trauma and fear of oppression to gain our votes. They take advantage because they never do anything. If anybody disagrees, I'm welcome to look and listen about a policy that has been implemented by Democrats. When is the last time there is a policy implemented by Democrats that was for black people specifically? If there's one. I know in my facility, I don't know of any. So I think that, these conversations, and I want these conversations to permeate through to my children. I want them to hear and listen and be like, listen, I need to do critical thinking. I need to know for sure what's happening before I make a decision. And I guess, I don't know if I finished the point about the duality and the nuance in these things, but, let's say business-wise, Trump is the right person for the job in this country. But there is a constituency of Trump supporters who are racist, who believe that the conservative perspective and policy is not available or should not be utilized to the benefit of black people. And in their eyes, the right is made up of God-fearing United States American white people, and that their job is to cleanse or purify this situation. And it's crazy. You have the attack on the I guess that was the Pentagon or the White House, where they tried to go in and then take it over. Like, that is insane. But it's like nobody has an opportunity to actually flesh out these anomalies or these things that are actually designed to fall through the cracks and keep us in a position of submission to this current political process. So I know this spiel started out talking about Candace Owen, but it pivoted into the political process to a certain degree, or the interpretation of political parties and their policies, and then kind of delved into why the nuance is so important, which is why it's not being put to the forefront, because they do understand that once we know these things, they'll no longer be able to use the fact that they know more than us to herd and cattle us into decisions that work against our own self-interest or our self-interest. But again, I invite people to watch the interview. I invite people to listen to other content, and not clips where they're trying to tarnish, but actual real commentary from Candace Owen and what she feels like and what she believes, and allowing that to be the basis with which I interpret my opinion, basically, about what it is that she stands for. Also, take what she says as informative to help fuel my research into whatever topic it is that she's, speaking about, so I can formulate my own opinion instead of, basically riding the train of everyone who's using these clips to create a negative spin or narrative around that young lady and her views, because what I've heard so far does not match the rhetoric that has surrounded her name, or that I've seen surrounding her name up until this point. So I guess this is to be continued, but for now, I think it's something that I need to check out. Okay, bye.